They tried to be conciliatory towards Madrid, but their efforts at compromise, at reasonableness, were rebuffed by the Spanish government. So I have to assume that people don't start with a foreknowledge of the situation. Catalonia is in northwest Spain. It's a region of the Kingdom of Spain. So the Catalans are a distinct people. They speak the Catalan language, and yes, it's related to the Spanish language, and it is related to French, but it's got a same grammatical system. And there's a strong Catalan identity. Some would say it's a national identity. And Catalonia has a history of independence as well, but it's several centuries since it's been fully independent. But independent nations come and go. They become independent. They cease to be independent. They regain independence. I don't use the word gain in a pejorative sense, or let me say a prejudiced sense to suggest it's necessarily a positive thing. It might be desirable, or indeed it could be undesirable. Now, I don't have an axe to grind about Catalonia, I think you're supposed to pronounce it. I've only been there twice in my life. But anyway, these Catalan nationalist politicians who held that referendum, they have been awarded prison sentences, in one case of 13 years. Other people were handed down sentences which were shorter, but there were still several years in prison. I think, my goodness, this is the kind of thing that would make Draco of Athens blush. That these people, they didn't kill anyone, nobody was harmed, not one drop of blood was spilt, nor do I wish it to be spilt. No one was bruised, not one twig of furniture was broken, and not one penny was stolen. These are extraordinarily harsh sentences. For what? For holding a vote? Now, the Supreme Court of Spain ruled that it was illegal. They went ahead and did it anyway. So, all right, the law is supposed to be upheld. But if you're a judge, if you're obliged to hand down some sentence, you could hand them down a few months. 13 months would be too harsh, let alone 13 years. You could give them a heavy fine. You could bind them over to keep the peace or something. I don't quite know how Roman law works, particularly in Spain. So they were charged with sedition, as in seducing people from their loyalty to His Majesty King Felipe VI, as though what they did had caused disaffection to the monarch. Anyway, Carles Puigdemont, forgive me, I've mispronounced his name, who was the Prime Minister of Catalonia. He had gone to Belgium and he's handed himself into a police station. He may well be sent back to Spain under the European arrest warrant to stand trial. So I thought this was outrageous. But let's trace it back in history a little bit. So, well, Spain, where does this idea of Spain come from? Well, the ancient Romans conquered it many centuries ago, well, having the Carthaginians having been there before. So Spain has passed through the hands of foreigners. And the Romans named it Hispania, but they had nearer Spain, further Spain. It was divided up into even actually more than two provinces. And obviously the Spanish language is an outgrowth of Latin. That's why it's so easy for Spaniards to learn Italian. I mean, for example, I did a year of Spanish at school, and then I found I could read Italian no problem at all, despite never having had a lesson in Italian, and vice versa. So anyway, they became part of Spain, but the Moors had invaded, that's North African Muslims, in the 8th century AD, and the Roman Empire had broken up. Spain had split into several different states, countries. I don't know, what should you call them? Because outside the United States, you might realize, well, state can often mean a national unit, as in the United Kingdom is a state. Or let's say, Germany is a state, although it's also subdivided into states. It's very complicated. But anyway, so the North Africans conquered the whole of it. And it was a Christian country at the time, speaking several different languages. Okay, there's Spanish. There are languages related to Spanish. Well, there's like the Andalusian dialect or the Galician dialect, which is Gallego, as in quite close to Portuguese. Catalan and Valenciano are almost the same, but there's the Basque, which is radically dissimilar, and so forth. So then eventually there was the Reconquista, but some people say it wasn't a reconquest, it was a conquest for the very first time, really by Castile, that's central Spain, gradually pushing out the Muslims, and finally in 1492, the fall of Granada, the last Muslim city in Spain, and then the Muslims were told they must convert or leave very quickly. Likewise, the Jewish community, who'd been well treated under Mohammedan rule, and so some of these people converted. Often they pretended to convert, and they clandestinely practiced their faith. And this underground Judaic outwardly conform to Christianity of the Catholic stamp, they managed to identify each other and practice Judaism as much as possible, surreptitiously. Only in the 1980s did they feel sufficiently secure to come out to the public and say, actually, we were secret Jews for centuries, marranos. Others fled abroad, went as far as, let's say, there was some Ladino spoken there. So a sobering reminder how the Christian world has often treated Jews worse than the Muslim world. So Christendom can't brag of being philo-Semitic. Anyway, so Spain was formed. Spain wasn't even officially one kingdom until 1700. It was several different kingdoms. But the Catholic monarchs, Isabella and Ferdinand, the time of Christopher Columbus, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And Christopher Columbus may well have come from Catalonia, possibly from Genoa in Italy. There's a big statue up in Genoa harbour. I won't go into Italian history, but it wasn't one country either. There's a Republic of Genoa. But if he spoke Catalan, that wouldn't necessarily mean he wasn't from Genoa, because, well, so let's say in Sardinia, on the west coast, people speak Catalan to this day. I've been to them, so those Catalan-speaking cities like Castelsardo, Alghero, and so forth, or in perhaps even a mainland Italy. Anyway, so Spain was formed, and a century ago there was a strong Catalan nationalist movement, increasing the consciousness of Catalan national identity, and part of a Europe-wide movement of the minor indigenous ethnic minorities striving for self-assertion, a bit like Irish nationalism, autonomy, or perhaps total separation. And we see there was compulsory schooling by the late 19th century. The Castilian language, or Spanish you could call it, was being spread, was being promoted. But Barcelona was a hotbed of radical activity, and other cities in Catalonia likewise, of anarchism, of communism, and so forth. And often people felt a distaste for Spanish nationalism, feeling it was chauvinistic, jingoistic. There was the invasion of Morocco when Spain had lost most of her overseas colonies, and the Moroccans had little in common with the Spanish, despite, I suppose, many Spanish people are being of Moroccan and Muslim descent. You could see the Moorish influence in Spain, but not so much Spanish influence in Morocco. And obviously the Moroccans resisted ferociously. And it was a very costly war. There was very little to be gained. It wasn't of much economic value. Eventually, sheer weight of metal prevailed. But many Catalans didn't want to participate in this. There were a lot of strikes and so forth. And the Spanish Civil War, the Catalan nationalist movement was in control of Catalonia, defending the Spanish Republic, hoping to have major autonomy, possibly even independence. But obviously that clashed with the internationalist spirit of communism and, I suppose, anarchism, the very localist spirit of that. So anyway, the nationalists won the war, Spanish nationalists who wished to preserve the unity of Spain, and Spain was ruled by Francisco Bahamonde Franco from 1936 to 75. Okay, the Captain General, El Caudillo, the leader, El Capitán General, which had been a title only for monarchs prior to that, so he was sort of a non-royal monarch, if you will. So he was an ultra-conservative, militarist, authoritarian, believed in having a confessional state, Catholicism as the state religion. Many people regarded him as a fascist. He certainly cooperated with fascists. But anyway, he died in 1975. The monarchy was restored. Juan Carlos II was proclaimed king, and he very rapidly liberalized the country. He broke his accession oath to uphold the principles which had informed the national movement, as in Franco's political party, and transform the country into a constitutional democracy, a constitutional monarchy, a democracy, as it had been until 1931. And the Spanish government was quite reasonable. Hello, Ben Perryman, and afforded a wide degree of latitude to the different regions. The Spanish Constitution speaks of the nationalities of Spain. There's not just the Spanish nationality. People have strong regional identities. You might even call them nationalities. So Castile, the area around Madrid. And Madrid is actually a fascinating case in point. Madrid was built when Spain was being united to be plonk in the middle of the country. There wasn't really a capital before that. Castile might have been Toledo. So a planned capital for its centrality. But there's a distinct Galician identity, Andalusian identity in Extremadura, and so forth. Here we are. The Catalans, their identity was very much suppressed in the 70s. And Barcelona Football Club, that's why it's más que un club, more than a club, and often smuggling Catalan national flags in to wave them at matches. But they had quite a lot of autonomy till recently, and there are two types of police in Catalonia. one of which is answerable to Madrid, the other answerable to Barcelona. And the separatists, they won elections some years ago. They held one referendum that was disregarded by Madrid. They wanted to hold another one in 2017. The Spanish Supreme Court said that was illegal, but they went ahead and did it anyway. And the police who were answerable to the central government, they tried to disrupt it. The police who were answerable to the Catalan authorities did not. So I can't blame the police. I know this is sort of the Nuremberg defense, not that they do anything that vicious. And I think a few people were a tiny bit hurt by the police. Let's not exaggerate. And of course, the most lurid tales are told to try and besmirch the reputation of Spanish authorities. It's sort of la leyenda negra, once again. But the vote went ahead. Now the turnout was quite poor. Some people who believe in keeping Spain united, they tended to boycott it, said let's not legitimize it by participating in it. It was ridiculously high majority. It makes it seem farcical, and we can thereby just laugh it away. And so the Spanish authorities said that this is a nullity. It has no constitutional standing. It's not remotely democratic. But anyway, a clear majority voted for that, for separation. Now, I don't have a strong view on this. I would mildly prefer Spain to remain united. And the European Union said, no, absolutely not. We shall not accept Catalonia as an EU member state. And all shades of Catalan nationalist opinion seem to want Catalonia to be another member state of the European Union, the 29th as it is, because the United Kingdom is still in the EU for the moment. And Brussels and Strasbourg wouldn't accept that. But I found this intriguing because the EU has done so much to split up other countries in recent years. Well, Yugoslavia, which existed in some form even 20 years ago. Yugoslavia is now Slovenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Northern Macedonia. Have I forgotten any? Croatia, forgive me. And recognizing some of these countries like Slovenia and Croatia that declared independence. Should Yugoslavia remain independent or not? Again, I don't have a dog in this fight. I tend to favour centripetal over centrifugal forces, but there we are. And I recognise those who wish to preserve Yugoslavia, but sometimes behaved appallingly, carrying out large-scale massacres. But and then, you know, the European Union vowed that it would not allow Kosovo to be an independent country, and then recognised it, vowed that it would not recognise Montenegrin independence, and promptly did so, and so forth. So reneging on these solemn promises given to Russia and other countries, and recognise the independence of Eritrea, of South Sudan, not so many years ago, often being sympathetic to the independence of Tibet or Taiwan, and on and on. And yet refusing to recognise the independence of Transnistria, of South Ossetia, Abkhazia, the Luhansk People's Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic. Now, I don't want those countries to be independent either. You know, I regard South Ossetia as being legally part of Georgia, but, you know, I think wouldn't it be terrible if it changed to be an independent country, and blah blah blah. And I think Donetsk and Luhansk belong to Ukraine. But why is it one rule for EU member states and another rule for the others? You see the double standards. The rule isn't applied consistently, and indeed by countries like Russia don't apply it consistently either. So think of the Scottish National Party. Well, 5 years ago, the United Kingdom held a referendum on a completely free and fair basis. Well, in Scotland, the SNP wanted it. Shall Scotland remain part of the UK or not? And 55% voted to remain part of the UK. Obviously, the whole thing was a false prospectus. Should Scotland be an independent country? The SNP wanted to be in a member state. That's not independence. Being in the EU could be splendid, but you're not independent. Independence could be overrated. Being in the EU could be overrated. Okay, so they seem to be completely nonsensical, going in two different directions at once, the SNP. If you want to leave the United Kingdom, be totally independent, that is consistent and logical. I don't agree with it, but I have a certain respect for that. You could say you want to be in the United Kingdom and part of the EU, again, and that is logical and consistent, be inside two larger entities, but you want to leave the UK, yet be in the EU, that makes no sense at all. Of course, as the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, supposedly, then that does make a little bit of sense to say, we'll leave the EU and we'll leave the United Kingdom and stay in the European Union. So anyway, and then Sinn Féin, who launched this vicious campaign against democracy for decades, terrorising people throughout Ireland, mainly in the north, also in the south, murdering police officers, robbing banks, kidnapping people, mutilating people, a vicious, xenophobic, Anglophobic, bigoted death cult who are always speaking up for some of the most vicious tyrants in the world, like the Kim dynasty in North Korea, or that demented megalomaniac Muammar Gaddafi, the brotherly guy to the revolution, so on. Despite being in the UK, one of the freest and most humane countries in the world, carried on that bloody campaign of terror against liberty in Northern Ireland. But where are they? Where are the SNP, Sinn Féin, or Plaid Cymru and so on, who are always calumniating the British state? Why aren't they denouncing what Spain has done and say it's outrageous, this is oppression, oh, we can't possibly tolerate that, these people being sent to prison for so long? And the EU is allowing this. And the EU saying, no, we won't allow Catalonia to be an EU member state. It wouldn't be the end of the world. You know, it's not the first time a country is broken up. And because most EU laws for most EU states come from Brussels and Strasbourg, presumably it would change very little, because there are regulations which everyone has to obey straight away. There are directives which each country must transpose into national law by a certain deadline. They can go further than the directive mandates, but they can't fail to implement its minimum provisions. These are often on health and safety. There are decisions which are applicable to whomsoever they are addressed, might be to some member states but not others. So presumably it wouldn't change very much. I don't think it's a xenophobic sort of nationalism. Carles Puigdemont is married to a Romanian. Not everybody in Catalonia is Catalan. Some of them move from other parts of Spain, like Andalusia or Madrid or wherever. The Basque country, Aragon, and some of them move from other EU countries such as Romania in particular. Some of them move from other parts of the world such as Nigeria, Senegal, Pakistan, Paraguay, and wherever. So, but some of these people who are immigrants regard themselves as new Catalans. Some of them even support Catalan separatism. So I don't think it's so vicious. Look, the Catalan language has been promoted. Some people who don't speak it don't really like that. Certainly in Barcelona, Castilian is widely heard on the streets. I was speaking Spanish to people and nobody looked askance at me. I didn't get any dirty looks, but perhaps because my Spanish is so halting, so laden with grammatical errors, it was completely evident to people from the very first moment that I'm an Anglophone and I don't speak Spanish to anything like a level of mastery. Yeah, I would like to see Sinn Féin and the SNP saying, oh, this is outrageous and the EU is being bigoted and depriving people of their liberty. But for some reason, they're stum on this. I was in the Falls Road several times seeing the Catalan flag and the word Libertat, the Catalan word for liberty, Sinn Féin forming fraternal links to Catalan separatist groups. But they are surprisingly reticent on this. Why the stony silence? Anyway, so as I say, being part of Spain wouldn't be terrible. You could say the referendum didn't count. It wasn't legal. Not enough people voted. I think under the Spanish constitution, Catalonia doesn't actually have a right to declare independence, but the Catalan authorities have done it anyway. Now, there have been 2 referenda in which this has been carried, and there's been an election won by the separatists. So the case for separation is quite strong. But this is part of my beef with the European Union. When the elite don't do as they're told, the European Union says that doesn't count. But if the European Union win the vote, then that's it, settled for all time. This is an issue which must never ever be revisited. So take the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. The Danes held a referendum on it and the Danes voted it down. But they were made to vote again the next year, a massive EU propaganda campaign to scare people into voting yes, and unfortunately it worked. The Norwegians were made as stern as stuff. They'd twice been offered the EEC membership and twice said no. The Swiss likewise, not even to join the European Union, but even having closer links, and they stood up for themselves. The EU isn't all bad. I'm not saying it's evil, all right? There are some laudable aspects to it. You wouldn't have so many people who are so firmly in favour of it if it was all completely maleficent, whatever you want to say. Yeah, then let's say the Republic of Ireland, Treaty of Nice, we voted against that the first time, and then we're made to vote again, and the Project Fear kicked in, and so, yeah, people voted yes. But if you vote yes the first time, you're never ever allowed to have a vote again, say, well, should we vote no? And that's it, they say, no, it's all settled. Likewise, the Treaty of Lisbon, Republic of Ireland voting no the first time, another one voting again a bit later. Hello, Jay's Bar Humbug. Yeah, voting, there are all these worthless guarantees. Obviously, the EU is completely untrustworthy, so often breaks its own rules. Take the Growth and Stability Pact around about 2002 in relation to the euro. Germany and France breaking on a huge scale. They're supposed to be fined, and that was just written off. Oh, all of a sudden it doesn't count. Sacking governments by phone call in Spain and Greece, and all these packages they accepted when the Greek people voted not to accept them, and driving people to suicide in Greece with massive unemployment, with the economy shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. What was Europe going to be all about? Stability, prosperity. It was the complete opposite. You see how countries that didn't join the euro, like say the United Kingdom or Denmark or Sweden, did much, much better. during the credit crunch. Anyway, so there's the one-way ratchet. You concede competences to the European Union, goes up and up and up, but you can't move it down. Having ceded the right to control a certain issue to the central authority of the European Union, the member state can never get it back. Now, people might be much more relaxed about ceding these competences to control certain areas of legislation to the European Union if the member state knew that if they had second thoughts about it, they could later bring that back to themselves. So that's one of my problems with it, is this really endless drive to centralize. Also the Drang nach Osten, and I don't use that in a prejudicial manner, of why you're always wanting to expand more and more member states. Albania next, who's next? Turkey possibly, but there was that military coup attempt, so I think that scuppered. Possibly talking about Morocco in the late 80s, the EEC wanted them to join. Why not just have what you stay with what you have and consolidate instead of constantly trying to expand? This megalomania was very troubling. So what would I like to see happen? I would like these people to be let out of prison, okay? They're being far too harshly punished. Hello, Ireland has a strong national party from communism, socialism to communism. I don't know who you're talking about, Sinn Féin. I mean, they're mildly left, you know, proposing tax and spend in the Republic of Ireland whilst imposing retrenchment in the north. Completely hypocritical. We're anti-establishment, despite having been the government of Northern Ireland for 20 years. They were going to break through. They would have broken through a few years ago, but they failed. About 10 years ago, the economy was going really badly. Their narrative seemed to strike a chord with people. They'll win one day. They'll be in government one day. What goes up, you know, must come down. The other parties will fail one day. Yeah, 10 or 20 years, they will be in government, maybe even as a major party. Won't be terrible. So that's Catalonia. I don't have a strong view about whether it should leave the EU, leave Spain or not. I mildly say better not, but there we are. So, I mean, not all people in Catalonia are happy with this, including some ethnic Catalans don't necessarily want to leave the Kingdom of Spain. But how culturally distinct is Catalonia from the rest of Spain? Good question. I don't really know. I don't know enough about it. They don't have bullfighting anyway. But obviously you can't have hard and fast rules about what's a nation and what's a culture and have a clear dividing line. Cultures spill into each other. We transmit cultural memes. We receive cultural memes. Cultures cross-fertilize. They're not hermetically sealed from each other any more than languages are. So there's always cultural intercourse. Don't take that the wrong way. Although the other sort of intercourse no doubt helps as well. So that's the Catalan situation. Way too harsh. What about human rights? I mean, holding a vote, there's nothing more democratic than holding a vote. You could just disregard it. And so they, Spanish authorities tried to stonewall. No, absolutely not. We'll never, ever recognize this. It seems to work because the less committed separatists have simply accepted the inescapability of membership of the Spanish Union, and the hardliners are still there. Part of some of the Remainers in the United Kingdom were proposing something similar with regard to Brexit. If we say no, absolutely no, never, it'll go away, and seems to be semi-successful. So please support my channel. You know, donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, on Patreon, things like that. Like me on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. I need donations to sustain the channel. I teach people online history, English, literature, English as a foreign language, politics, religious studies, geography, French, GCSE, A-level, international baccalaureate, things like that, interview preparation, and hire me as a tour guide in London.